Hello. Welcome.
Thank you.
Come in. And you guys, do you mind if I sit?
Please do.
Okay.
They say you shouldn't stand when you can sit.
I have a hip replacement and back surgery, so sitting is actually more comfortable than standing. But because I sit, I'm working on a book of knitting patterns, so I'm designing, and I have to knit every day. So, and I sit all day at work on the computer, and then I sit at home knitting. So the more I sit, the more comfortable sitting becomes, and the harder it is to stand. So
you gotta keep moving.
And I lost my dog a couple months ago, so there went my reason for walking. So I'm.
And where's your knit top?
It's too hot. I can show you. I did bring something to show you, though, but I'll save it for later. Do you want to see something knitted?
Sure. She wants to do her introduction.
Well, that's fine. I know. Oh, should we do our introduction? Do you want to do whatever you want to do? You whatever you want to do.
Yeah, let me just do a little quick.
Okay.
Intro,
you do
and then
the
you can show your.
I was just
stuff.
gonna play chit chat with you.
We can. But
Well, we want to hear the sermon.
okay. I will come do the sermon.
Okay.
Welcome to the passage. Hello. We don't.
Yeah,
We're not
no,
worrying.
we don't
We're
need
not
it.
worrying about this.
No.
Tonight, Book Passage is very proud to welcome Lee Gant. She's a master knitter, teacher, and a very acclaimed and nationally popular knitwear designer. Her book, Love in Every Stitch, is a beautifully written testimony to the transformational power of knitting. Based on her life experience, as well as others, Love in Every Stitch is an inspiring look at how knitting can infuse people's lives with joy, healing, and love. So with that, please warmly welcome Lee Gant. End of sermon.
That's the end of sermon. Okay, I'll stand up. I
You
guess.
don't have to stand. You don't.
It's okay,
No,
really?
It's fine. Yeah. No, sit.
It's easier if I sit. if you
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah. This is nice and informal. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll need this though.
What's that, the book?
I just have to have something in my hands because I'm a fidgeter. So
Knitting's good.
That's right. So if I don't have my knitting, I'll have something to hold on to. I'll just give you a little bit of introduction about me, and that sort of will set up the story that I want to read. I grew up in a house of alcoholism and a lot of fear and discomfort. And back in the 50s, 60s, parents didn't really talk to their children much and explain things, so I didn't know how to process what was going on in my home. And so I sort of turned inside myself and made up an imaginary world to live in where I could be a little more comfortable, and just kind of hide from the fear. And it turned into a place where the thoughts that would go through my head, to me, I thought they were other people, voices telling me what to do, not realizing that everybody has thoughts that rattle around in their head. And because I sort of backed away from my situation, I made up stuff, and I told a lot of stories, and I just became negative. I don't know. It's I've lost my train of thought, but things were very uncomfortable growing up, and I lived in an imaginary world where you know, lying and stealing were okay because that's what my voices told me it was okay to do. Negative attention was better than no attention, and I became quite a troubled child and acted out a lot and through my teenage years was very rebellious, and not that that's not normal for teenagers, but I really went into the deep end of trouble, and I believe that because I didn't understand what was going on in my family, I just rebelled against all of it, as nobody was going to tell me what was wrong, and I thought there was something wrong with me. So I found myself in situations that weren't very comfortable, and ended up in jail a few times, and institutions, and places that for troubled youth. And I left home at an early age because I thought getting married and having a couple of kids would solve all my problems, and that didn't work out too well either. But what I did find was by chance I ran into a knit shop that had just opened on the street where I lived and walked through, and the mom and daughter who owned it invited me in, and instantly there was a sense of remembrance. And my mother and her sister knit when I was a child, and I remember watching them and being fascinated by what they were doing with their hands. But these women invited me into the shop and offered me food and just kind of fed me, and I don't really think they knew how troubled I still was, but for a minute while I was there, I felt like I had some friends and a place to go, and it kind of got me off the street, at least during the day. And eventually they, because I was watching them knit and remembered a little bit. I learned when I was 8, and I never made anything with the knitting either. I just remember how it felt to be in control of something that I had in my hands, and I wasn't getting in any trouble while I was knitting. And to me, it was just magic to take some string and wrap it around some sticks and watch it grow into something. So eventually they gave me yarn and needles and asked if I would knit a sweater for their shop, and that to me, and they would pay me to do it. So that was huge back then, to get paid for anything, or to have somebody even trust that I could do something worthwhile. Because at this point I had zero self-esteem. To me, society's rules were for everybody else but me, and I was so bad that there was no way I was going to ever figure out how to get well, and for these women to ask would I knit a sweater for the store was huge. So instead of sitting at home drinking at night and getting into trouble, I sat in my room and I knit, and figured out it was a cabled fisherman's sweater. So I figured out the pattern and stuck to it, and it was the most comfort that I could ever remember having, was to have this project in my hands and to watch the sweater grow, knowing that somebody was gonna be happy with what I was doing, rather than getting in all this trouble. And when I finished the sweater, they paid me and said it was perfect, and then they hung it up in the store window. So that kind of was a huge turning point for me, to have something that was huge. That was just like, sorry, I'm so distracted by that fan.
Oh,
but it's okay. No, we need the air. It's all right. I just want to let you know that's why
I have the cooler up too.
It's making me almost
the cooler
dizzy.
on.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I have the cooler on.
Okay, thanks. Anyway, so that's why I'm really scared, because it's like that fan is making my head just twirl. So anyway, so the sweater and the knit shop just brought back, you know, memories and the colors, the same way that people feel about bookstores, where it's just there's just a comfort in here, there's a feeling. I get it when I go into a yarn shop. And so that was kind of a turning point for me to realize that hey, I do have some value, and somebody cared enough to give me, you know, to give me a project and trust that I could do it. And it planted a little seed of hope in me that there is something good inside there, and that I can be a good girl, you know, and do something worthwhile. So that was the connection to the yarn store. And now, should I read now and then go on for, okay. Is it still okay if I'm sitting down? We're okay? Okay, all right, okay. Or should I stand? It's
Whatever
okay.
you're
Okay.
comfortable with.
Okay, that's okay. It's called The Gift. My last clear recollection is me standing in his doorway. I'm struck with fear, but the choice to enter has already been made. My father calls me to his bed, and in his steely eyes, I see a warmth and light that I don't recall. And then I remember that he's my daddy, and I sit on the edge of his bed. I'm surprised at his withering. His once 6-foot frame looks to be much smaller, and the protrusions from under the sheet are bone-like, where there was once a man of flesh. Hi, Dad. I muster all of the happiness that I can find for him. My heart is broken, not because he is dying, but because I am still hurt and unforgiving. His sunken eyes disturb me while I look at his face from where I sit, and we talk about boredom and what books he has read. My sister's with me, and she sits in the small chair under the window on the north side. This is the first time in 40 years that the three of us have been together in the same room. After a silence the size of outer space, I recall a photograph and bring up its memory. Remember the time we went to see the deer and we had a picnic there? I try hard to recall anything else that will make him happy, but I'm at a loss. And then I see the antique wooden Swift. Oh, Dad, I want that. Do you know what that is? Of course I do, but how would he know that? I'm not really sure if he remembers that I knit. It looks like a spinning wheel, but it's not. It's the thing that winds the yarn into a ball. Do you like it? His eyes brighten. I love it, Dad. Then you can have it. I'll have it shipped to your house. Really? I'm a little girl again, and I'm happy because I got what I wanted. My sister stirs from her silence, and I'm grateful because I don't know what else to say. I don't remember to tell him how loved I felt sometimes when, after lowering the Sunday paper, he would pat the couch and invite me to climb up and sit next to him, and he would let me rest my head on his chest, and I would listen to the thump of his heart, and then he would stroke my hair once or twice before lifting his paper to the light. Are you hungry, Dad? My sister asks him. What would you like for lunch? I've flown a long way to get here, and I'm hungry, but I don't know if I can eat. Seeing my father in his weakened state has left me with a knot that food probably won't fix. Remember the liverwurst sandwiches we used to have? Yeah, with mayonnaise on white bread, and sometimes I'd put green relish on it, remember? I asked them both. I haven't had a liverwurst sandwich in years. I love liverwurst. His voice sounds tired. Me too, my sister says. She drives to the store for the makings and leaves me alone with my father. I rub the back of my fingers softly against his freshly shaven cheek while I examine the horseshoe scar that still covers the top of his head. I remember the green wool vest turned crimson with his dried blood, and think what a good thing it was that he was drunk that night when he drove into that tree and sheared the top of his head off as he was catapulted through the windshield. I sit a little closer to him, like my mother did for days when she tweezed shards of glass from his head and plinked them into an ashtray. I move my finger from his cheek and trace the scar with my finger. You don't have much hair left, Dad. His smile reveals spittle at the corner of his mouth, and I see amusement in his eyes. Do you want to see what I brought? I reach into the bag at the side of the bed. Look, it's a bear. I made it. With a strand of wool and a strand of mohair held together, I painstakingly followed a row-by-row pattern, and then I stuffed the toy with a plastic bag and felted it. After it dried, I stuffed it again with fiberfill, and then stitched up his back end perfectly. His little ears sat in just the right spot, but it took days to get up the confidence to embroider his face. The face was the hardest part. If you don't get the face just right, it just looks wrong. My confidence wavered every time I threaded the needle with black floss, but after a few tries, I knew I got it right because the look on the bear's face makes me happy. It brings him to life, and I smile every time I look at him. Never in my life have I seen anything resembling the fascination that I see on my father's face. He turns the fuzzy cream-colored bear over and over, petting its high haunches, examining each foot with its soft pad and 5 toes. "I like this," he says. "I really like this, because it looks like a National Geographic bear, not a toy like other bears. It looks like a real bear." I'm beaming. "You made this for me?" His question surprises me. I didn't. I brought it to show him what I love to do and how good I am at it. I brought it to show him a piece of my success. I brought it to show him that he was wrong. "Of course, Dad, I made it for you." He's suddenly childlike, grinning and amused with his gift. How different he is from the father who frightened me with his loud obscenities, smashing of furniture and drunken rages. How playful he seems against the image I carry of him pressing a butcher knife to my mother's throat. He brings the bear closer and looks into its face. My stepmother and sister enter the room with a plate full of sandwiches, and he shows off his knitted prize. After much adoration, Tina, my stepmother, places the bear, per my father's instructions, on the small television across the room under the picture of his beloved cat Marv. "Why, that bear looks as though he might want to jump right off that TV and into my lap," he said. I've never seen him so silly. "Could you make more?" he asked. "My nieces would love one of these." "How many do you need?" Some of the special we've just shared goes away as I imagine myself making 2 more bears for children that I don't know. And then I see the joy on my father's face, and I tell him that I would love to knit more for his nieces. I tell my father not to be afraid, and then I tell him about the time I took too many pills and died, and I tell him how wonderful it was, and please don't be afraid to go. I don't remember what we talk about while we eat. I think that my sister looks too thin, and then my father finishes a whole sandwich, something he says he hasn't done in a year. 3 months later, the pouch connected to the seat in front of me on the airplane is filled with tissues. I can't peel my forehead off the window that looks out to the rest of the world, nor clamp the flow of tears. My knitting sits untouched in my carry-on, and my head hurts because I've cried too long. Not because my father is gone, but because I'm still blaming and unforgiving, and I don't know how to fix that. It's a damp and misty New England morning. A man wearing a plaid kilt and cabled socks plays his bagpipes under the canopy of a sassafras tree, while family members that I have not seen in forever stand next to one another in a semicircle. I'm holding onto the arm of my father's brother, and I lean into his chest and tell him that I always wished he was my father. He squeezes my arm and whispers that he knows and that he loves me too. Tina asks if anyone has something to say, and I'm surprised at her composure. My sister turns to me with a pleading look, but I'm not prepared for the question. Although I want to be strong, I fall apart as I thank Tina for loving him. The time has come to take him where he's asked to be scattered, and my sister and I wait for the boat on a large rock next to the dock. A sunny breeze blows my hair off of my face. The charter boat is grand, and while we ride the swells of waves, I feel as though I'm on a ride at the fair, and for a minute I forget why we're here. As we travel around the point, I see the shoreline and the beaches where I spent my childhood, and then through the woods at the top of the hill, there it is, the house my father built. Tina signals to the captain and the boat chugs and slows. This is the place. I wait for instruction as I've never done this before. Tina tosses rose petals overboard from a large brown paper bag, and after she opens a small plastic bag, hands me his ashes. "Go ahead, you dump some and then we'll dump some." This is creepy. When I tilt the small plastic bag, the wind kicks some of the contents back into my face and I am stunned. Tina laughs. He would have laughed at that too, she says. We leave a long trail of rose petals in our wake as we return to the docks. My father was a hard and bitter man. He told me once that I would never amount to anything, and I believed him as I was a child and he was my father. Hurt, resentful, and defiant, I would spend a lifetime fighting to prove him wrong. The gift of the bear brought a spark of selflessness, something unfamiliar to me. To see such joy that my accomplishment brought him was a turning point, although it would take many years before I understood the significance of it all. It would be during those years, while in the comfort of knitting, that my world would open to a place where questions revealed answers, and I received the biggest gift of all. So that was a hard place for me to go. It took me a lifetime to figure out how to forgive my father for the things that I believed were his fault. I blamed my parents for everything, and until I started to take some responsibility for my own actions, I wasn't going to get well. And so with this, the bear that I knit and gave him, it brought along with it some self-esteem as well, and eventually, after getting sober, I had to do the traditional rehab and AA and get off the drugs and alcohol, and eventually I got a job in a yarn store, and customers would come in and ask questions and need help, and I became good at what I was doing, and enough so that I could help them. And what happens when you get a group of people sitting in a room kind of working with their hands, they talk and tell stories. So it was in that venue that I would start to share some of my past, and my knitter friends would say, "You don't seem like that person that you're talking about." So they wanted to hear more stories and encourage you should write a book, you should write a book. These stories are, how the knitting has helped you get to a better place. We want to hear more. And I'm not a writer, I'm a knitter, I told them. And but the idea that I might not be the only one that knitting has helped, and when I say knitting, it could be crochet or painting or sewing or anything that you do to create something with your hands.
Could be writing,
That's
too.
Exactly, writing. Something that you're passionate about, that gives you comfort, that opens you up. The thing that's different about the physical creating of the knitting is that you're focused down on something here, and what that does is allows your mind to open up and give you a big, huge place inside your head where you can drift around to really anywhere you want to go. And it was in that big open place, through the comfort and the meditation of it, whatever you want to call it, it was, for me, it was a calming place where I could actually slow down enough and let go of my anxiety and start to process information about what did happen in my world as a kid. And rather than from a stressful point of view, I could look back and see the progression of how things changed and how I grew and how I was able to heal. So that's how the stories came about. There's a online place, stitchlinks.com, where that's Ann Corkill from the UK did an ongoing research into the real chemical process that happens in your brain when you make something with your hands. And she's doing studies and research, and they're starting to have knitting in hospitals and everywhere that there can be. I would like to see it in every teen center, after school program. There's nothing that isn't good for you in the process of making something with your hands. So it lowers your blood pressure, it's good for pain management. For me, it's my anxiety medication. I mean, I still carry that with me. So I sent. She was collecting stories about how knitting or cross stitch or needlepoint has helped people, and I read some of those, and it touched home. And I thought, oh, I have a story. So I wrote in a story, and we connected, and I thought everybody should be able to read these stories, not just because it was a research group. We weren't privy to all of them, and I wanted to read more. I wanted to know how this has helped other people as well. So so I just decided I would try and write, having no idea what I was doing, and it took a few books on how to write a proposal and how to write a story, and I fashioned a short little query letter and went to the place online where you're supposed to go and cut and pasted personal, to about 280 agents, and because I like that repetitive motion, just like that, and got interest from about 10.
Wow.
And I singled out the one because she had the same name as my sister. I mean, I had no reason or rhyme to do that, but and before I even had anything written, I told her, I said, my real purpose and mission is to travel around and talk about this, to let people know that this is a tool that you can use for a whole lot of reasons to feel better, and especially the kids. At this point, I was visiting a foster home in our town and volunteered to teach these emancipated foster kids. I didn't even know what that meant when I went in there, that 18-year-old foster kids are tossed out on the street. I had no idea, and that really, hit home with me. So I had a group of kids in there, and there's some of the stories are in the book, and that was a real eye-opening experience to hear some of the stories that these kids shared while we were knitting and crocheting. And because they were transitional in and out, I wanted to follow a group from start to finish and teach them how to knit and see if it would make a difference somehow for them in their life. So, so then the next place was a homeless shelter in town that was a family support center with Catholic Charities, and I just showed up and said, can I teach a knitting group? And they said, sure. We have 16 kids we could set you up with, and I thought, well, I don't have enough needles and yarn to buy for them. So I thought, well, we would make our own needles and see how that went. And it didn't go very well the first time out. So I put a call out on Facebook, which I had to learn how to do the social media thing. And the knitting community out there is about 58 million strong. So I just put a call for anybody who had any scrap yarn or needles that they wanted to donate to these kids. And in a week and a half, I had 700 pairs of needles.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
And 22 boxes of yarn showed up at my doorstep
How lovely.
from all over the world. I'm from all over the world. It
Amazing.
wasn't just around here. So
Wow.
that was another just smack in the hand. Said this is amazing and it helped me to feel like I have a place to belong. I have a group, where it's wonderful and giving, and I didn't know what volunteer meant. In my world, the world owed me. I would never think about giving anything of myself without expecting something in return. And when I started to teach these kids and volunteer and saw all the support that came from people that I didn't even know for kids that they didn't know, it sort of turned things around. And some of the stories of these kids at the homeless shelter are in here as well. And that was another fun adventure.
Could you say how many Facebook friends you had, what to get all those things?
I actually, I think I have 4,000 friends or so.
But
Which
that's amazing to get that many.
I don't know how that happened. I learned how to, I had to learn how to do the Facebooking thing, and I found a group of alpaca people who raise alpacas, and I actually love to knit with alpaca, so I just started friending them, and they're a huge community. So I think that's how where most of my friends are in the alpaca world. But I've been working at that for a few years, and I do design knitwear, so that's out there as well, and people are starting to recognize my work and my name, and through I would post pictures of these kids, and people on Facebook would say, "Oh, I recognize the yarn that I sent." So I was sharing with them what they shared with the kids. So it started to go around, and that's kind of how that worked. But through the process of giving, of myself, so much more came back to me that I never expected, and all part of the healing process for me as well. So let's see, teacher, designer. What do you want me to do now? Oh, so I need. Okay, so
What
as we're
age
talking
did you walk into the knitting store?
I was in my mid-20s, I think. I had 2 children from first marriage, teenage marriage, because I thought that would solve all my problems. And that didn't work out too well, but I had moved from Connecticut to California to start over a new life. And I got lost out here. I just fell apart. I had no family, no friends, and I just gave up on myself.
And what happened to your children?
They're fine. They made it through. I eventually, like I said, I got off the alcohol and drugs, and that changed their world as well.
Sure.
And then I met Bill, and 35 years we've been together, and
wow.
life is great. Oh, it's all on knitting. See, he's my director. So this is the process of designing, just so in case you were wondering how it works. This is a little dress that I bought at the thrift store. I love thrift stores because it's all recycling to me. And I thought this was cute. And I thought I want to design little dresses because they're cute. But I had no idea, how deep is the armhole on a little 1-year-old thing or whatever. So I bought a bunch of dresses so I could measure them, and then I could draw a picture and color it in with my colored pencils, and find some yarn, and then do the math and figure out how many stitches equal an inch, and then that's how many I would put on. So this is the inspiration piece, and from that I came up with this.
Isn't that adorable?
So that's sort of how the process works, and just so you know, I do really knit. And the secret that I like to share for the day is, if you ever can't find any buttons that you like, you can buy plain ones and take a Sharpie and draw on the buttons. And it's been through the washer and dryer. Pass it around. It's been through the washer and dryer, so I know it works. And so if you need polka dotted buttons and you can't find it, you can just make your own.
Make your own.
I have a question.
Yes.
I got lost. How did you start knitting or sewing or something? I understand how that made a big deal for you and your life changed. But what was it? Why did you pick knitting or sewing or whatever?
My mother and her sister spent evenings knitting together on the couch.
Oh,
And
okay.
I was fascinated by the clicking and if I was good and could sit still, they would let me sit on the floor in front of them. And I remember sitting with my chin in my hands, staring, and they would talk as if they were in a different place, and they were I was invisible because I was sitting still and they would let me watch, but I was fascinated by what they were doing.
And how old were you?
I was 8. So at 8 years old,
8, and then came to what, 10, 12 letters?
I only think I knit for a short while. Like, dude, I moved on to something else, building birdhouses or, you know, the Girl Scouts, and I didn't know then that it would have made such a difference in my life and given me so much comfort. So I knit for a while and made the spools with the nails and all the cord and all that.
So would you go back to knitting, or what did you want to say?
When I ran into the yarn shop in my 20s was the next time that it brought it all back to me.
My God, you made this?
I did. That's
more than I did.
so
Thank you.
there you go. Yeah, I learned at a young age, but I didn't do much with it. I just remember how it felt to have something in my hands that I could be in control of.
When everybody else was not paying attention.
Right, I had, right. So it was self, you know, induced
I
comfort.
got that part I got. I just wanted to know
Yeah,
the
okay.
beginning, that's all.
Did you
Sorry.
win any awards?
Oh, nobody cares about the awards. Okay, the very first, one of the first Afghans that I made, a friend said, why don't you enter it in the fair? And I didn't even know about the county fair.
Sure.
And so for $1 you can enter something. And I put it in there and didn't think much of it.
Sure.
But what was more important than the blue ribbon I won was walking into that pavilion with the entire, you know, 3 counties worth of handmade things and being a part of that. So to have my Afghan amongst all those beautiful handmade things, all the quilts and all the paintings and everything that people do with their hands, totally gave me a sense of community and belonging. So that was the first time I ever felt like I might really belong somewhere, you know, out here in California and in this community where I wasn't the only one sitting home at night making something, you know, with my hands, because I didn't have any friends who knit. You know, they were all, why would you want to do that? That's, grandmas do that. Well, and it's hard to explain to them that when I'm in that place, it's comfortable. I'm finding comfort in everything to do with it, and the self-esteem snowballs, and then I was able to give back and share what I know with others.
I understand they teach veterans to knit.
Anybody.
Back from, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been very helpful.
They're in the juvenile systems. There are people going into the prisons to teach, to have them. There's nothing about it that isn't helpful to anyone, kids, adults. It's just the act of making something with your own hands is a feel-good, self-esteem. Look, you do this. You can hold it up and say, look what I did. I made this. And nobody says, you know, well, you didn't make your bed today, you didn't get an A on your test. They say, wow, you made that. That's cool.
Do you have any more?
There's actually a pattern in the back of the book. There's a little story about a little boy, Pat, who had cancer, and his mom sent me his story. Thank you, dear. I bring him along for this, you know. But, so there's a little hat pattern. I designed this, and my first tricolored pom-pom was kind of interesting. And it's just a beanie that, you know, for any size, any yarn, so it's a universal beanie pattern. And then I made a few more out of, I had somebody from Italy ask if I would like to use some of her cashmere for my book, and I thought, sure, if you want to send me some cashmere, I can toss it. Who wants to catch? Catch there. There you go. Good shot.
Isn't that nice?
Pass it around. This is here you go, and here's another one. Double. Ready?
Oh, that's
There you
great.
go. So just so you can, there's just nothing nicer than wrapping that around your fingers on a cold winter's day. And just,
yeah.
all I have to do is just.
And do you crochet as well?
I do. I crochet, I sew, I quilt. I'm a wannabe painter, but I can't get from what I see in my mind, from my hand onto the canvas, so I gave up the painting. But
So do you have your own shop then, or?
I don't. I like to visit other people's stores and hang out with their groups. I always thought that I wanted to own my own yarn shop, and a lot of knitters do have that dream. But then when you find out what it all entails
can't
in the
knit.
back room, it's all about ordering
Right.
and paying the bills and
No time for creating.
exactly. So I think I'll just travel around and visit everybody else's shop. But my real mission is to I would like to reach the kids before they turn to drugs and alcohol, and give them the opportunity to know that this is available as a tool. It doesn't, I mean,
So how young would you think they should be?
7 or 8 anything younger than 7, the dexterity isn't quite there yet.
Okay.
I've taught a 5-year-old, and she made 3 giant rows with big holes, and she was done with that. But she did learn.
Sure.
So I'll teach any age if they want to learn. And I have an open group every week where anybody who wants to show up, I will teach them to knit for free. I think if all of us 58 million knitters would teach one person,
Right.
it would snowball, and then again and again, and just find one person to teach and share what we know. And not everybody has the same obsession that I do, or they won't. But to know that on a winter's day when you're cold, there's a basket full of nice colored yarn, and you can pick up a crochet hook and do something with your hands for a little while. It allows you to go somewhere else instead of, I got to go to the store and I have to do this. It quiets you down for a little while so you can rest from the world. And to me, I need that rest often.
That's all in your book? Some of it's in your book?
I'm sorry?
Some of that is in your book?
Yes. It's not.
And
There are stories in here from other knitters who've shared their stories with me, but the kind of the thin red line that goes through it all things is how I react and interact with them, and how actually they've helped me.
Okay.
So
I might have missed something because I had a phone call earlier, but do you work with seniors?
absolutely.
Did you talk about that earlier, or?
No, I just had, and there isn't anyone that there's a great story in here about one of our oldest gals whose grandson, or great-grandson, was in Afghanistan, and we knit the helmet liners for the boys in the platoons. And I think she's 88 and still knitting, coming every week to group, and seniors would be a great, I've had only one that I couldn't teach because we get to the end of the row and she did fine, and as soon as we turn around, she couldn't remember what we're supposed to do for each row. Get all the way across the row and turn around and go, okay, can't remember what I'm supposed to do. I said, you're not alone, because I'm not the same problem.
My wife asked that because I'm a senior and I used to be a woodworker. I'm still a sailor, but when I'm not sailing, she thinks I need to have another hobby. And somehow she thinks it's knitting.
It would be, I think you would
I don't know.
You'd be a fabulous knitter. You won't know until you try it. But there isn't anyone who knits, and this happened in New York on the train. If you see someone knitting, and if you ask them to teach you, I almost can guarantee you that they will. They'll sit down, pull up a chair. Here, I have some extra yarn and some needles. Let me show you how to do it. And they'll be happy to. And the local yarn shops, you just go in and say, buy a ball of yarn and some needles, and say, can you show me what I'm supposed to do? And they would love to.
Well, I learned to sail because I'm a cheapskate, and I could sew sails and sew spinnakers and stuff like that on a big machine, but I think I'm past that time now, right?
No, I think you could knit.
Yeah,
I think you could knit.
But
But
knitting-
interesting.
I don't know about knitting, I don't know.
Well, we'll try.
Or
I
crochet.
could try.
You could try.
Right.
You never know until you try.
That's right,
There you go,
absolutely.
see?
That's my
There you go.
blessed life, yes, absolutely.
I think you could give it a try. You never know. So,
Do you teach in Santa Rosa? Is that
I do.
you do?
I do. I have a very huge anxiety about getting lost, so I don't travel very far from home, unless I have my driver. That's my bill. Hopefully in my lifetime I'll be able to work through that, but that's still one of my big problems, so I don't travel very far, and Santa Rosa is home base. So
Is your writing just a natural talent? You write beautifully.
No, I had to learn how to do that, and
I disagree.
That's why everybody tells me that. I had zero
You don't
confidence.
just learn to write like that, I
No.
don't think. It just flows so nicely.
She's
Well-
a natural storyteller.
It's it's
Oh,
great.
thank you. Well, the process was reading, but the first draft of this, I thought people wanted the memoir, so I did a chronological accounting of everything from Hatfield that I remembered in kindergarten and first grade. And actually that's what I sent to the agent, who said this is garbage. And so instead of, hiding in the closet, which I would normally do, I said, well, I guess the only way I want to try this, so I bought some books on how to write stories, and then I took a class at the local junior college, a creative writing class, and the first thing we did was poetry. And I don't want to do poetry, I want you to teach me how to write. But what I learned in the poetry section was to listen to the sound of the words, and how I started to become fascinated with words and how to put them together in order to, because I see the world in photographs, sort of, and I can stop action the photograph in my head and save it for later, and then I can recall it and write it. The way that I think that I'm writing is I want you to see the same picture that I see.
We certainly
So,
do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this was learned. I had no confidence, zero. Head banging. I signed a contract when I had 23,000 words that I was unsure of, and I had 12 weeks to come up with 70,000 words.
Who published it for you?
Viva Editions.
They're great.
Out of Berkeley.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had no confidence whatsoever, and I'm getting better. Yes.
Was that creative writing class at College of Marin?
Santa Rosa Junior College. Oh, yeah. Did we go to Petaluma?
JC.
The JC in Santa Rosa. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone will do. It's a great.
They have them all over.
It sort of just helped me. Everything
one here.
clicked.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Have several writers
Yeah.
here.
It just was, and I hadn't been, to school in forever, and
What grade did you graduate?
I had just graduated high school. Yes,
Well, that's good.
I did.
Could have been
I
worse
did.
based on what we hear
I
of
did.
your childhood.
Exactly. Oh, I graduated by the skin of my teeth, because my senior year I had one class which actually was creative writing. Funny thing, and I never went. So it was 2 weeks to graduation, and the teacher sent a letter home to my mom and said that I'm not going to graduate, and I had 20 assignments to make up, and so I wrote 20. I guess I was writing. So I did it, and I passed. I graduated by the skin of my teeth. Because school, to me, was a place to go to get away from home. And if I liked what I was learning, then I was very good at it. I was interested. If I didn't care about European history, then I didn't pay any attention, and I flunked the class. Because I thought I had a different set of rules than everybody else, and that I was completely the only one, who had, a rough
Hardship.
I had no idea that, because I was so sheltered and sequestered, we weren't allowed out of the yard, my mother didn't drive, we didn't go anywhere. So I didn't know about the rest of the world and what was going on. I just knew that there was something wrong.